The dust at this busy recycling plant is pervasive, and the steady noise of hoppers and conveyor belts makes this a challenging environment to work in. The facility in Rainham, East London, is owned by Sharp Group, a family-run skip and waste management firm. Already reeling from the effects of conflict in the Middle East, Asia is now facing the prospect of strong El Niño conditions that could spike energy demand, sap hydropower, and damage crops. El Niño is a naturally occurring climate phenomenon that brings worldwide changes in winds, air pressure, and rainfall patterns.
And oil prices have risen sharply as violence in the Strait of Hormuz cast doubt over the fragile ceasefire between the United States and Iran. Brent crude, the primary benchmark for oil prices worldwide, rose by nearly 6% on Monday to 114.44 a barrel.
Tensions are rising in the Gulf again after the United Arab Emirates said it intercepted 15 missiles and 4 drones fired from Iran, and warned that it reserves the right to respond to the treacherous attacks. The attacks on Monday mark the first time the UAE has been targeted since Iran and the United States agreed to a ceasefire on April 8. When it comes to the specter of AI's labor displacing potential, Jensen Huang thinks that the American worker has nothing to fear. During a conversation Monday night with MSNBC's Becky Quick, hosted by the Milken Institute, an economic policy think tank, the jovial NVIDIA CEO said that AI was an industrial-scale generator of jobs, not the harbinger of mass unemployment that so-called AI doomers have often accused it of being. A number of different topics were broached during the talk, but a central theme that kept coming back was the ongoing economic anxiety surrounding the AI industry and whether it was something Americans should be legitimately worried about. At one point, Quick noted, "This is happening so quickly. Is there a bigger dislocation than we've seen in the past that leads to greater inequality? And what do we do about that?" The 2 state-run gas utilities are seeking steep tariff increases for the next fiscal year as the regulator weighs a gradual reduction in the allowance for unaccounted-for gas losses charged to consumers. The Oil and Gas Regulatory Authority has called public hearings in Lahore and Karachi on May 12 and 13 to consider tariff petitions from SWE Northern Gas Pipelines Limited and SWE Southern SAS Co. for FY 2026-27.
With the Strait of Hormuz caught in a dangerous limbo, the global energy markets have entered the most uncertain period of their history. Last month, the International Energy Agency predicted that both oil supply and demand growth would be slow compared to last year. This suggests not just supply disruptions, but also a weakening global economy. Oil markets are responding to the lingering crisis through volatility, shortages and rising prices. The IEA warning that demand destruction will spread points to a grim reality. High prices are constraining economic activity, particularly in nations dependent on imported energy, such as Pakistan.
And I have a confession to make. I was far from a kid when the Harry Potter books came out, and I inhaled them after being introduced to them. And I didn't just read them, but also noted the publication dates and was among those who would pick up the latest copy on the eve of its release and then reread them. That was, however, quite a few years ago. I haven't returned to the series in a while, but once a fan and all that, a sprinkling of the Wizarding World vocabulary still pops up here and there in everyday conversation, and sometimes more. And US says destroyed several Iranian boats after Iran claims strike on warship in Hormuz. Trump warns Iranian forces will be blown off the face of Earth if they try to intercept US vessels. Fire at UAE port after drone attack and 3 Indian nationals hurt. Korean ship damaged in strait. Shipping group says transit through strait still not possible. Iran says US ceasefire proposal under review. Cooper discussed situation Wasserman Dubai. And after weeks of simmering tensions, hostilities broke out once again in the Strait of Hormuz. as the US military claimed to have destroyed 6 Iranian boats while Tehran targeted a US warship entering the strait, and besides firing several missiles and drones towards the United Arab Emirates.
Islamabad. The Supreme Court's 2019 verdict, which provided legal cover to the otherwise controversial One Constitution Avenue project, significantly boosted its market value and attracted around 70 new high net worth investors. Former Prime Minister Imran Khan was also among these investors, but sources told Dawn that the cricketer turned politician had already sold his apartment, C1E, in 2022, and this property is now registered in the name of Shahid Nasir.
And geothermal startup Fervo Energy said Monday it hopes to raise up to $1.3 billion in its initial public offering. The company would be valued at up to $6.5 billion if shares sell at the top of its $21 to $24 price target. That's more than twice what Fervo had reportedly been seeking earlier this year when it confidentially filed paperwork with the SEC to start the IPO process.
Amnesty International has accused a rebel group in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, of mass war crimes and crimes against humanity. In a damning new report published Monday, the rights group said the Allied Democratic Forces, ADF, was behind multiple cases of murder, abductions, forced labour and marriage, sexual abuse of women and girls, and the exploitation of children.
President Donald Trump says the U.S. has struck 7 Iranian fast boats in the Strait of Hormuz as Washington seeks to guide stranded ships out of the Gulf through the largely closed waterway. The UAE and South Korea both reported strikes on ships in the vital channel on Monday. The UAE also said a fire broke out at the oil port of Fujairah after an Iranian attack.
At first sight, last week's unprovoked attack on a French nun walking along a street in occupied East Jerusalem came without warning. However, for the roughly 180,000 Christians living in Israel and the 10,000 or so Christians living in East Jerusalem, the attack is the latest in a growing number of incidents of abuse, assault, and intimidation that the community says has increased in tandem with Israel's turn towards far-right nationalism. While incidents of violence and arson grab the attention, low-level incidents of spitting, insults, and disparaging graffiti have become a daily experience for many Christians in the area, the majority of them Palestinian, contributing to the desire on the part of nearly half of all the religious community under 30 to leave. A severe security vulnerability affecting almost every version of the Linux operating system has caught defenders off guard and scrambling to patch after security researchers publicly released exploit code that allows attackers to take complete control of vulnerable systems. The US government says the bug, dubbed copy fail, is now being exploited in the wild, meaning it's being actively used in malicious hacking campaigns.
US President Donald Trump has warned that Iran would be blown off the face of the earth if it attacks United States ships as tensions around the Strait of Hormuz push the truce between the two countries to the brink. Hostilities were renewed in the region on Monday as Iran attacked the United Arab Emirates, and Trump said the US military shot down 7 small Iranian boats near Hormuz.
Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva is expected to travel to the United States to meet with his counterpart Donald Trump later this week. According to media reports, the Brazilian paper O Globo first reported the planned trip on Monday. The Reuters news agency also reported later in the day, citing 2 anonymous Brazilian officials, that Lula would travel to the US in the coming days. One source said he was travelling on Wednesday for a meeting with Trump the following day.
And in the long-running saga that is Cerebras Systems' IPO, the finish line is finally in sight. The AI chipmaker said on Monday that it is preparing to sell 28 million shares at $115 to $125 a share. This would raise $3.05 billion and give it a $26.6 billion market cap at the high end. That would be a nice bump in just a couple of months for the late investors who piled into its $1 billion Series H at a $23 billion valuation in February. And it would also be a boon to OpenAI and a few of its executives.
Russia and Ukraine have declared competing unilateral ceasefires in their 4-year war. Russia announced on Monday that its ceasefire would be between May 8 to 9, when it traditionally marks Victory Day in the Great Patriotic War, as it calls World War II, with a major military parade in Moscow. Kyiv said later that it was calling its own ceasefire for May 5 to 6.
And Israeli forces detained 2 activists after stopping the Gaza-bound Sumud flotilla off the coast of Greece. It happened in international waters nearly 1,000 kilometers from the Strip. And Russia on Monday declared a unilateral ceasefire with Ukraine between May 8 to 9, when Moscow marks its annual World War II Victory Day commemorations, and threatened a massive missile strike on Kyiv if Ukraine violated it. Ukraine responded by declaring a truce of its own between May 5-6, saying it was not serious to expect it to observe a ceasefire during a Russian military holiday.
23 innocent bystanders have been killed and 30 wounded in gangland shootings in Sweden over the past 3 years, according to statistics that highlight the country's battle to rein in violent crime. Sweden has struggled for more than a decade to contain gang violence linked primarily to score settling and battles to control the drug market. The innocent victims include people hit by stray bullets, cases of mistaken identity, and relatives of targeted gang members, according to the police statistics released on Monday.
And the leader of Mali's military government, Assimi Goïta, has taken on the role of defense minister following the killing of the previous minister in last week's uprising by rebel groups. State television channel ORTM reported on Monday that Goïta was taking on the post following the death of Sadio Kamara in large-scale attacks by an al-Qaeda-linked group working with Tuareg separatists.
Former Andreessen Horowitz investor Katie Hahn announced on Monday in a press release that her firm has raised $1 billion across new funds to continue its thesis of backing crypto and blockchain. The capital will be spread across startups at early and later stages, Bloomberg reported, and within the crypto and blockchain space, it will be used to back startups focused on alternative assets like gold and other commodities, the agentic economy, and financial services.
And image model releases are driving growth for AI mobile apps, generating 6.5x more downloads than traditional model updates, according to a new report from app intelligence provider AppFigures. This marks a shift from earlier days when the release of new models powering the conversational experiences drove more demand, alongside the new features like a voice chat interface. And tackling methane emissions in the fossil fuel sector would help efforts to hold back climate change and increase energy security, especially as the Iran crisis threatens global supplies and, according to a report by the International Energy Agency, IEA, the oil, gas and coal industries account for about 35% of all methane emissions from human activity, notes the IEA's Global Methane Tracker 2026, and released on Monday. However, there is little progress in reducing them, the report points out.
The Zambian government has suspended negotiations with the United States on multi-billion-dollar deals for health services, and Minerals Foreign Minister Malambo Haimbe said on Monday that the proposed agreements have stalled due to Washington's unacceptable terms and demands for preferential treatment. The United Arab Emirates, UAE, on Monday formally withdrew from the Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries, SOPEC, just days after exiting another bloc which shocked energy markets. The announcement follows the UAE's earlier exit from OPEC and the wider OPEC Plus alliance. Islamabad, the National Accountability Bureau, NAB, Karachi on Monday, announced the recovery of 80 acres of government land illegally allotted to Baria town in the Gulshan Islamist housing scheme in Hyderabad's Der Ganjo Takar. A press release said, according to the press release, the land worth $6 billion was located in a prime area of Hyderabad district.
And public opinion within parts of the American Jewish community on the US-led war against Iran has shown a noticeable shift, with support easing and opposition rising over time, according to a recent survey. While different polls focus on different segments of the community, both point to growing reservations about the campaign as it has progressed.